Okay, so you finish recording your song and you open up your mixing session and you're just staring at the screen and you're not sure where to start, or you've been mixing for a while and you can't get things to sound right. You get all kinds of plugins in your system and you get really confused and things aren't sounding right, and it seems like the more you spend on the mix, the worse it sounds, right? Does that happen? It happened to me when I was first learning. Well, this video, I'm gonna give you 5 quick and easy and practical mixing tips that I used and I learned when I was coming up that really changed my mixing forever, even to this day, and is going to help you get rid of all the frustration, cut through all the nonsense, and get you going in the right direction very quickly. So stick around. Okay, 5 mix tips, 5 simple concepts that you can use in every single mix that is going to help you not only gain consistency from project to project, but help you mix faster and get yourself more into a rhythm and more of a system that's really going to help turn out the end product much, much faster and get rid of the frustration. So, simple mix tip number 1, the static mix. We have a session here in Studio One. This mix is already kind of done, so the static mix has been long gone. But just imagine that this session, you imported all your audio or you recorded all your tracks. Very first thing I want you to do, before you start throwing plugins in your system, forget all the plugins. I want a clean slate. All I want you to do is work with the fader levels, get a balance, and use some panning. Get things sounding decent. And you should be able to do that in about 15 minutes or so, depending on the size of the session. That's it. Then sit back and listen and write down on a little sticky note or something 2 or 3 things that you really like about what you're hearing, and then 2 or 3 things that you find are problem areas. For example, you may listen to your static mix and say, the vocals sound really good. I know we need some reverb and delay on it. It's a dry vocal, but it sounds good. It sounds up front. I got it balanced right. It sits on top of the mix pretty well. We may need to do some automation later, but I like the tonality of the vocal. We're not going to mess around too much with that. Or you like the sound of the guitars. You got your guitar tone and you thought the guitars sound pretty good. We may have to EQ them a little bit, but for the most part, they're not problems. However, you may listen to the drums and go, you know, the drum recording's really good, but I really need a bigger kick and a bigger snare. Or the overheads are too bright. There's splashy cymbals. We need to work on that. Those kinds of things. Couple of problem areas, couple of things that you're going to kind of leave alone to the side before you start mixing. And this is listening to the entire mix. All faders up, balance, panning. By doing a static mix, it points you in the right direction. And by writing a couple of bullet points down, it gives you a game plan of where to go next. So you're not just mixing free willy-nilly, that you have a plan and a system. Try a static mix if you've never tried it before. It will absolutely open up your eyes and help you go in the right direction much, much faster. Okay, mixing tip number 2, using a busing system. What is a busing system, you may ask? If we look here in Studio One, you'll see that towards the end of my session here, down here in black, I have a busing system. All my drums are routed to a drum bus. All my percussion tracks are routed to percussion. My bass tracks, guitar tracks, keyboard tracks, vocal tracks, and the background vocals. I always use a busing system in all of my mixes. And you may say, well, why do you use a busing system? Well, for a couple of different reasons. Let's take our drums, for example. So if I solo up our drums here, we can control the volume of all the drums once we've balanced the drums, right? All down here in brown. We balanced the drums. We got the mix between all the different drum kit elements the way we like, right? We've done all our processing on those individual tracks. Now we're down to a drum bus. And we can control the volume of the entire drum set with one fader, such as right? So you can control the entire drum set level with just one fader. Same thing with all the other buses. Once you have a busing system and you got the mix the way you like it, and maybe as you're getting towards the end of the mix, you find that, you know what, the vocals just need to be a touch louder. And let's say you have 4 or 5 different vocal tracks, like I have here, and all here in red, I got all these different vocal tracks. Well, instead of going in adjusting each individual level, if you already like the relationship between these different tracks, you could just touch the lead vocal bus and you can just pop it up a couple of dB or whatever it needs to be. It makes a quick way to make quick, easy adjustments. The second advantage to having a busing system, again, we'll go back to our drums here, is you can do additional processing if needed on that bus. So for example, our drums, if you look at all our drums, I hope you're enjoying the video. Hey, I got a 90-minute mixing course that is perfect for beginners, and I want to give it to you right now absolutely free. Go to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. The link is in the description box below and download it today. No fancy plugins, no expensive gear. I'll show you how to get fantastic sounding mixes using only the stock plugins that come with your DAW. Mac or PC, any DAW works. Don't wait, this will seriously jumpstart your mixing and get your skills to the next level. I'll see you inside the course. Now back to the video. We do have some EQ and some compression on some of the drums and some plugins on all the individual drum tracks down here in brown, right? However, if we go over to our drum bus here, we also can do additional processing. We could do things like a tape machine, maybe a little bit of a compressor for drum bus compression. So you're not compressing each individual element of the drum kit, but maybe the whole drum kit as a whole to give yourself a little bit more excitement, power, and glue to the drum set. And then maybe a little bit of EQ on that drum bus as well. So again, you're not just EQing the kick and the snare and the overheads and the toms individually, although you might do that on the individual tracks, but you're doing it here on the drum bus to give the whole drum set, that whole instrument, you're treating it as an entire instrument and not just single elements. Gives you far more control, far more power. That's the second reason you may want to use a busing system. You can process on that bus in addition to the individual tracks. And lastly, as I said, it's just a quick way to go ahead and adjust, make fine-tune adjustments to the entire mix without having to go back and search through all the faders. So try using a busing system if you haven't used it. It really does help, and it makes things quicker. And again, it makes things more consistent from project to project. And you'll find once you start using a busing system, you're going to be hard-pressed to go back and doing it another mix without a busing system. Okay, tip number 3 is another kind of a mini busing system, if you will. We're going to call it using groups. And what do I mean by that? Well, we have multiple tracks of the same element. Instead of processing them individually, we can process them as a group. So for example, check it out here in Studio One. We have a kick drum here and a kick sample mic. Now I could put EQ and compression and all my processing on 2 individual tracks, but what I like to do is I like to route those to a bus here called kick group. And then that kick group track will go down to my drum bus. And on that kick group, I can use maybe some tape plugins or some EQ or compression or whatever I feel I need. And I can EQ and compress that track as a whole. So I have these 2 individual kick tracks. I can process them together as one kick sound, which is really helpful. I do this an awful lot when I work in the analog world. If I have 4 or 5 different kick drum tracks, I will process them together, group them together, and route them down to one fader on my console and EQ and compress those as a group. The only thing that you'll do here in the box separately is maybe you'll do a blend of the faders between those 2 elements to get the blend that you like going to your group track. Again, makes things a lot easier. You don't have to use as many plugins, and you start thinking of your, in this example, your kick drum tracks as a single instrument and not separate elements. Same thing with my snare. I have a snare top, a snare sample, and a snare bottom. Those are all being routed to a snare group, and on that snare group, I'm using some different processing. Now, sometimes I might use some processing on the individual elements if I need to. So let's say the snare top needs a little bit different of an EQ curve than maybe the snare sample does, depending on the sound of the sample. I might put some EQ on there as well. More times than not, that's usually not the case, but sometimes that is the case. But again, having it on a group, it routes everything down to one group, and you can control the entire snare volume with this one group going to your drum bus in this particular example. Not just on drums. I do the same thing on bass guitar. A lot of times I have a bass DI or a bass amp, or in this case, a bass DI and a bass distortion track. Once again, I'll route it down to a group, and I will process it with EQ and some tape saturation or a channel strip in this particular example, and process those 2 tracks as one bass guitar. And I'll just change the blend between the DI and the distortion track. So using groups is very, very helpful. Again, a way to lighten up the amount of plugins that you need to use to route things in a little bit more of an organized way, and it just gives you a little bit more additional control. Okay, tip number 4, you knew this was coming. Limit your tool set. What do I mean? Limit the amount of tools, and in our case, plugins, that we're using in a session or in your browser altogether. We all have done this. We all go out and buy the latest plugins. These manufacturers are advertising to us, telling us that their next plugin is going to solve all our mixing problems. By the way, that's really not the case. If you really want to solve your mixing problems, you need to get some good quality training. Links will be in the description box below for that. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to help you even further. However, what I suggest all new mixers do, and all of my students that are getting into the craft of mixing, or even ones that have been mixing for a year or two, and they have all these plugins. I can't tell you how many times I talk to students on a monthly basis that tell me no matter how much they mix, every plugin they have, nothing sounds right. And then I take a look at their session and it looks like a mishmash of plugins. Far worse than this, mix mash of plugins. They have tons of plugins from tons of different manufacturers, and then they open up their browser like we'll do here, and they'll see all these plugins, and you go, oh my goodness, how many plugins do we have? How many plugins do we need? How many plugin manufacturers do we really need to work with? The true answer is probably one. You could pick any of these bundles for any of these major manufacturers and your mixes will sound great if you learn how to use the tools. But what I highly recommend you do is pick your favorites and do just that. In your DAW of choice, almost every DAW can do this, make some kind of a favorite folder and put your favorites into that folder. For example, I did this here in Studio One with my reverbs and delays. I have all my favorite delays that I typically like and my favorite reverbs. I have a handful of each. Maybe you'll do the same with your channel strips, or maybe you'll do the same with your EQs. Pick 10, at most 10 plugins that you need, and I want you to use only those 10 plugins for the next 6 to 10 projects that you work on. Pick yourself a channel strip, pick yourself a couple of reverbs, a couple of delays, a couple of different EQs, maybe a saturator or something like that. And then maybe you have a utility plugin here or there, like a phase correction tool or something, or transient designer or something like that. But just pick yourself a couple of different flavors of each kind of plugin and just limit yourself to that. What's gonna happen when you do that? Two things are gonna happen. Number one, you're gonna mix much faster because you're not gonna get lost in the plugin browser black hole. That's the first thing. Second is that your projects are going to start to sound more consistent. When you're using the same tool set over and over again and you're learning that tool set inside and out, your mixes are going to sound more cohesive and they're going to be more consistent. So you're going to mix faster with better results, more consistent, limit your tool set, pick your favorites, and stop checking out the plugin browser, seeing all the plugins that you have every time you go to work on something. That's going to help you with your overall mixes. Okay, last tip of this video is I want you to use reference tracks. I don't care how long you've been mixing. I've been mixing for almost 20 some odd years, and I still use reference tracks on every single project I mix, hands down, no matter what. I teach it in all of my courses. Using reference tracks gives you a roadmap, and it kind of helps you also with the static mix to know what should the mix sound like in the end. What are you going for? If you're working for a client and they give you a rough mix or a producer mix, you have an idea of what they're already used to hearing and what they already like. Using reference tracks keeps you from mixing completely blind. And when the newer you are at learning this craft, the more important that this is. You want to get yourself some kind of a reference track plugin of some kind. I highly recommend the one by Plugin Alliance. This is by Audio Adapter Metric AB. There's others on the market, but this is a great one. It has a lot of different tools that you can use. I use these in all of my training courses. I use these all on my YouTube mixing series videos. You've seen me use this thing a million times. Using reference tracks is absolutely critical to getting a mix that sounds great in the end, especially if you're mixing for somebody else. You need a roadmap, so use reference tracks. If you've never used reference tracks before, it will open up a whole new world to you. And if you take any one of my training courses, you're going to see how we use reference tracks. It's really not that hard. So go out, get yourself a reference track plugin tool, jump into one of my courses, and I'm going to show you how to use these things. And I even have a review on this channel on how to use this specific reference track plugin tool. But reference tracks is key. If you're mixing without reference tracks and you're just mixing blind, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're going to find you're going to do more mix revisions, you're going to be tweaking things to death, and it's never going to be right in the end because you're not going to know when to stop. You don't know what the end goal is. A reference tracks helps you identify what the end goal should sound like, where the improvements need to be made, and what direction you need to go in. Reference tracks is key. Now, I'm gonna give you one more bonus tip, so stick around. Okay, tip number 6, our bonus tip. You wanna have some kind of room correction software to help you with the deficiencies in your room when you're mixing. So one of the biggest problems, not one of the biggest problems that I'm sure if you're watching this and you're new to mixing, you've come across this, I hear this every single week in my coaching sessions, is that, Dave, I'm working on a mix, it sounds really great in my studio, I take it out into the car and it doesn't sound right. The low end is way too boomy, or the low end is way too thin, or the guitars sound really harsh in the car. And then I play it on my phone through my earbuds and it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound the way it did in my studio. It sounded awesome in my studio. That means your mix doesn't translate outside of your room. Why is that? Because if you're working in a studio, in your home studio, with studio monitors in a room, what you're hearing coming out of those speakers that's causing you to make mixing decisions is not accurate. The room is hurting you and you're not hearing what's accurately going on inside of that mix. Or two things that you need to do. One is basic acoustic treatment, which we've talked about a million times on this channel, and I'm sure you know all about that. But even beyond that, whether you're mixing on headphones or whether you're mixing with studio monitors, there are several companies that make affordable options these days, and we've done reviews on all the channels here to make sure that what you're hearing in your headphones are coming out of those studio monitors. They're correcting the problems in your room or the problems with your headphones and giving you a more accurate picture of what's going on in your mix. What is that going to do for you? It's going to allow you to make better mix decisions, and it's going to help you be able to get your mix to translate from your studio to other playing environments when you take the mix out of your studio. A couple of products you can look at. You can look at Reference ID by SonarWorks. You can look at the ARC system by IK Multimedia. That's another one for room correction, where they give you a microphone and you take some measurements. If you're doing this professionally and you really want to get to the Cadillac of room correction, you want to check out a hardware system called the Trinoff. That's another thing that you can take a look at. That's 3. But the 2 software solutions, IK Multimedia, Reference ID, those things are very affordable. In the first 3 mixes you do, it'll pay for itself. Trust me. If you're using headphones, there's several different products on the market that you can use that'll help make whatever headphones you're using, make them sound more flat and more accurate. Everything by D-Sonic, we did a review on that. Link will be in the description box. The Lewitt system, Lewitt Microphones makes a system. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but I'll put the link in the description box below. Again, very affordable, something you absolutely want to have. If you're serious about mixing in any way, and you want to get rid of the frustration when you have to take the mix into 100 different playback systems and then come back and make all kinds of tweaks because what you're hearing in your room or on your headphones doesn't translate out of your studio, then some sort of room correction is absolutely essential. It'll be the best money you've ever spent in your studio. Okay, I want to thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. So as I said, somewhere inside of this video, I want to give you something for free and I want to help you with your mixing. So if this is your first time here, go to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, get the free mixing course. It's right on the homepage. It's $100. It's my gift to you for visiting Home Recording Made Easy. We talk about a lot of the things I talked about in this video today. Check that out. Link will be in the description box below. Once you take that course, if you want to take one of my other courses on my website, I want to give you a 25% discount coupon code. That coupon code is YouTube25. Put that at checkout. It'll take 25% off any training course on the website. So until the next video where we talk about more mixing tips, I'll see you in the next video.